Hello, hello. There we are. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. If you don't know why I'm saying good morning, keep coming back. Just kidding. Or check out our YouTube. I disclose it on there several times. So I'm so glad to be back with you guys this week. As some of you know, last week was my birthday. Hey. And I've also developed an allergy to milk. And I chose on purpose to have ice cream for lunch. So not only were my kids sick last week, I was sick right along with them. It was great. We had a great birthday. It was wonderful. But I'm so glad to be back with you guys this week. I'm going to continue our series called Exit Ramp, Getting Off the Guilt Trip. And so we are in August. And so this series is going to cover August and September. So we're going to cover steps 8 and 9. So step 8 says, made a list of persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And then step 9 says, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And our verse for this series is Romans 12:18. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And so last week, Curtis kicked us off. Awesome. He started off by talking about that list. So in step 8, it talks about the list of people we had harmed. So he talked about the list and the obstacles that might be in the way of us making it. And also that when we're doing our amends, it's not just to check a box, but it's because we want to live at peace with everyone, hence our verse. So because you see this wonderful picture of exit ramp and all these roads and stuff, I thought we'd talk a little bit about going on a road trip, because my family just went on a road trip. If you didn't hear about our vacation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. If you did hear about it, it's because Curtis told you all the good things that happened. Because Curtis is an Enneagram 7. If you don't know what that is, Google that, because, you know, I love Google. And he'll pick out all the wonderful, great things, and all I see are my kids puking in the back seat. So that's a road trip with me. But my dream road trip would be driving in silence, the windows down, everybody peacefully talking to each other, having a great time. Because that didn't happen on our trip, what happened instead was trying to turn the radio on to maybe make the kids happy. That didn't work. Turn that back off. Pulling over because this kid puked all over themselves. Getting back in the car after we clean up the puke just for them to puke on themselves a little bit more. And it was just super, super fun. And moving the car seat from the second row to the third row and then back to the second row and changing the angle on it, making sure the bubble is in, the level thing. Got to be safe. But definitely not awesome. But a road trip is not an exit ramp. A road trip is the whole voyage, just like relationships. It's the road trip. And if we just try to jump out of the car because everybody's puking and you're sick of the road trip, you can't do that. You could try to do it in a relationship, but that doesn't make for a good relationship. So just like it wouldn't make for a good road trip for me to just jump out and say, bye, Curtis, enjoy the kids. I'll see you in Florida. We continued on. And so road trips, there's sometimes detours, there's destinations. So there's the starting point, the destination, the detours in between, the road bumps, the puke. You guys are sick of hearing about puke. So if you don't have kids, you're welcome. Here's your puke for the day. But so today we're going to elaborate more on the living at peace part, but how to stop letting the fear take the wheel. And so when we're talking about living at peace with everyone, I also, when I started recovery, I didn't want to just live at peace with all of you guys out there or with my family. I also wanted to live at peace with myself. And I needed to be able to sit in silence in a car without hearing voices, being reminded of shame and guilt, and having all the worst things I've ever done start to shame me. I wanted to live at peace. So that's why I started recovery. And that's why I kept coming back until I was able to achieve that peace. And then step 12 tells us to share it with others. So here I am tonight practicing step 12. So thank you all for having me. So when we stop letting fear take the wheel, we first got to figure out what fear can look like. And so I had fear not just in my steps, but I had fear of all sorts of different things. Living alone the rest of my life, cleaning because I don't know what's underneath the bed, fear of my kids dying. That was the thing. A lot of you did that journey with us, with our daughter, when we got those test results. That was a big fear in my life. And there's going to be many fears that are not even related to us doing our steps. But because we're talking about amends, we'll talk about some of those fears. Maybe those shame and guilt for the things we've done in the past. So when we're making amends, it's usually we've done something to harm someone else. So not just looking at the harm we've done, but also getting through the fear of what does that person think of me? Are they going to hate me? Are they going to shame me? Are they going to tell everybody I did it because now I've fessed up to it? So, which goes to what is fueling these fears. So, are we getting there? There it is. What is fueling our fears? So some of that is my past. Maybe the past relationships I've been in, how I was brought up. There was parts of my life where people, if I told them I did something wrong, now they just added it to their tally list, and they're just going to go back and remind me of it every single chance they got. So when I joined recovery, the last thing I wanted to do was admit I had done something wrong. So when the steps came up to it and they said, admit I'd done something wrong, it's like, dang it, even to them? And we'll get to that part and what that looks like. But yes, even to them. So there's different things that might fuel our fears. It's personal to every different person. Everyone in here and everyone online has a different story, a different situation, different relationships, different upbringing. We might have a lot of similar feelings. We might have had a lot of similar situations, but it's all unique to ourselves. And so what you have to figure out with you, God, and your sponsor of what is your specific thing that's fueling the fear in your life. Which brings us over to how do we handle those fears? Oh, we forgot a verse. Let's go back to that one. So Romans 7:15 through 18, which is about the harming people. So that's where I want to go back to this one. So part of what was fueling my fears was I was harming people is what came from this verse. Of I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. In verse 18, for I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. And no matter how hard I tried pre-recovery, there were some things I just couldn't stop doing. There were some compulsions, there were some habits that I just couldn't put down. And what's crazy is when I started recovery, they didn't just stop. I didn't walk in the door and all of a sudden all my problems were out there and all my pieces in here and I'm just never going back out. No, I carry my problems back in the door and then they stay with me. And so the trying to do something different, not able to stop doing it, those were the part of the things that were fueling those fears and those things that I had to apologize for and make my amends for. We've all done it. Nobody's gotten out of this life without having done it. So that moves us to how do we handle those fears? So we're going to go through the story of David and Goliath. And if you've never heard of it, I encourage you to go home and read it. It's super fun. Everything about David is awesome. He's my guy. Like when I was in the pits of my life, I had to cling on to a character in the Bible to read about because I needed to know that somebody else had gone through the things that I had gone through. And this guy was chased down. He was hunted, trying to be murdered. I was in that. I got a restraining order. I've been through that. So I could read what David did, read the Psalms of how he felt going through it. And so David is like my guy. He's like the me of the Bible. He also made terrible decisions. Same. So I love David. He's one of my favorites. So we're going to read a little bit about David and Goliath. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 17. There are 59, I think, verses in this, 59 or 57. 58, right in the middle. I will not read all 58 to you tonight. You're welcome. But I will give you some Cliff Notes versions of what happened with David and Goliath and some of the key verses. So the first part, if you don't know, so David was anointed by Samuel that he was going to be the future king. But he's still just a little shepherd boy in this story. And Goliath was a 9-foot tall giant that the Philistines would bring out into the battlefield to threaten the Israelites. And so that brings us to a little description of Goliath. So chapter 17, verse 4. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out to the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span, about 9 feet. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and his iron point weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went ahead of him. So he literally had some guy holding a shield in front of him as he walked. Now, this guy sounds pretty crazy. He's like huge, all armored up, like he's been in battle. Later on, it talks a little bit about how he's been a warrior since his youth. Like, that's all he's ever known to do because he was the tall guy on the basketball field, or basketball court, not field. I'm a woman, let it go. A basketball court. So he's the one who he didn't have to jump to dunk. He just stood there. So they just let him dunk all the time. So that's what's happening here. So he's coming out, he's scaring everybody. And what that looks like when we're handling our fear is it looks like naming our fear. So we name it. Goliath has a name. Our fear has a name, whatever it is. For me, one of my biggest fears was not being lovable, not being loved. So if I made an amends to somebody, they might never love me. If I might be telling them something that they don't know about, that's not bringing them harm, worked it through with my sponsor, I'm afraid of that relationship ending. I'm afraid of them choosing to go the other way. And so I had to name the fear before I could try to take it on. So the next part we're going to talk about comes from verse 16. For 40 days, the Philistines came forward every morning and evening and took their stand. And so literally, Goliath is coming out there every day for 40 days saying, hey, I'm big and awesome, and you guys suck, and I want to kill you. Who wants to try to kill me? That's really scary. And my fears, some of them started in childhood. So think about those 40 days going every morning and evening. That was me a lot of my life, especially after my divorce. I was like, I'm definitely not lovable. My ex-husband left me while I was at work. I came home to an empty house, having no clue it was happening. So those fears that I had, they weren't fake. They weren't made up. There was a real fear I had. So after I named it, I saw it keeps coming back. And so I have to address it because it's not just going to go away on its own. Which brings us to verse 32. So David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. So when I came to recovery, I took that stand, just like David did. I'm not going to keep letting fear rule my life. I'm not going to keep just hearing fear every morning and every evening, but I take a stand today that I'm not going to keep doing that. Then verses 34 through 37, to go here. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. Oh, because Saul said, you can't do it. You're a little kid. So David, he's really encouraging. If your sponsor acts like Saul, get a different sponsor. Just say. So David said to Saul, I'm going to do it. And Saul goes, no, you're not. But David said, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. He's a shepherd. And when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it, and I rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and the bear. The uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who's rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hands of this Philistine. Praise God. I mean, this is just David going on of remembering the ways that God has shown up in his life. Whether you guys know God yet or not, God has been showing up in your life if you're here tonight or if you're watching online. God has already been chasing after you. He's already been making a way, and just going back and naming the ways that God has shown up and fought on your behalf is going to help fuel that fire that we can take on that fear. We don't have to keep letting that fear rule us. God's got it. It's in God's power. I can't do it on my own, but God can. We sung about that earlier tonight. God can do anything. So then we go on to the little part that Saul says, the one good thing I feel like Saul ever did in his life. I'm judging him. He said, David, go, and the Lord be with you. And so this part, for me, reminded me that not only can I not do it without God's strength, but I need the blessings and prayers of the people in my recovery circles to pray with me. That when I'm about to take on a fear or I'm going through something in my life, I need to pick up my phone. I need to reach out. I need to not do it alone. I need somebody else praying for me so that I'm not in this by myself. Because we've all been trying to do life on our own before we started recovery, and it didn't work. So let's try doing something different. See if we get different results, right? That'd be cool. Yeah, let's try it. So verse 45 through 47. David said to the Philistine, you came against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Sorry, kids, if you're watching. I already said not 18 and under on YouTube, so sorry. Cut off your head. You will die. This very day, I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by the power of the sword or spear, but God who saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. Just a reminder, God can do it. But this is David telling his fear. Hey, there's somebody bigger than you, and it's God. God created all that we see, all that we don't see, the whole earth, the whole universe. This God who created everything is so much bigger than just this feeling of I can't be loved. I'm not lovable. And when I start taking on that fear, I can start telling the fear the truths about God. God loves me. So if I wasn't lovable, then God's already breaking the law because God loves me. And my sponsor loves me. And the people in recovery who I reach out to love me. Even if they don't answer the phone on the first call, they still love me. I apologize. A few of you have called me. I was on vacation. I love you. I am lovable. And so telling my fear who's boss. And then 48 through 50. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, he took out a stone. He slung it. He struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead like Play-Doh. This is bone. Everybody knock on your head and tell me you're not sinking in it. Okay? You're not sinking in it. You're not sinking in it. So, God's already at work here. 1, the aim, awesome. 2, sinking in his forehead, and he fell to the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistines with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, and struck down and killed him. Praise God. Praise God. Because the fear doesn't win. The fear is a liar. If you don't know that song, go look it up. Fear is a liar. God is bigger, God is greater, God is stronger. God can help you take care of those fears. You don't have to live bound to them anymore. So when we start to deal with those fears, we get to start moving forward. And so when we're talking about making these amends, moving forward in our relationships, we can take on those fears. But why should we face them? Because AA tells us, if you don't know AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, says we don't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. Because we want to learn from the mistakes of our past. If we just run away from every bad thing we've ever done, we're not learning anything except how to run faster. But then you run out of breath. I ran out of breath. I was sick of running. I ran. My last running got me in a 5-car pileup on 95, and I lost the ability to walk. Running doesn't work. Confronting the fear does. Because as we saw, with God, anything is possible. So we want to face it because we want to get to the other side. We want to seek freedom. We want to have better relationships. And remember, just like that road trip, you can't just jump out of the car. I mean, you could, but it's not a road trip anymore. So if you're jumping out of your relationships, running away from people, you're not having a relationship anymore. And when I learned to start making amends and start doing my side of the street, clean up my side, it not only helped the relationships of my past, it helped me to be better in the relationships I was in today and for my future ones. I have been divorced. I definitely had a part to play, but I wasn't going to make a good wife if I kept doing all of those things again. I had to do something different, and that was come to recovery and learn how to live differently. And so John 13:35 says, "By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another." And so when I'm choosing to make amends, I'm choosing to love somebody else. I'm choosing not just to love myself by cleaning up my side of the street, but I'm choosing to live in relationship with others. And that's me actively choosing that relationship with Jesus. Because if I choose not to be in relationships with people, I'm not really doing a relationship with Jesus really well. Because Jesus called me to be in relationship with people. Even if you're an introvert, oh, my introverts, I'm an introvert and I can do it. You can do it too. If you don't know I'm an introvert, don't talk to me about it because I'm scared of talking. Just kidding. So in step 8, it also talks about becoming willing to make those amends. So for me, part of that looked like just doing the dang work. My sponsor said to do it, just got to do it. Part of it was doing it scared. It's okay if not all of my fears are conquered. I can do things scared. I come up here scared. I told you, I'm an introvert. You see me? I'm hiding behind the table, guys. I might hide behind the TV soon. But I still do it because that's what God's called me to do. So when we do our step work, we can still do it scared. But we start becoming able to overcome those fears instead of letting the fears keep us captive. And honestly, some of the work I did just because the fear of staying the same was worse than the fear of change. And so I know when I was drinking and drugging, I didn't want to stop, but I'm in the hospital. I'm not doing well. There was a time in my life that I had to wear a heart monitor because my heart wasn't working. I'd have a HIDA scan on my gallbladder and all that stuff. I've seen all my insides because it wasn't working, because what I was doing wasn't working. And so I didn't want to keep doing that because I was going to end up dead. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to end up dead. So what are the fruits of facing our fears? Well, I'll tell you. You get to have relationships, freedom. Raise your hand. I want to know. Who in here actually does ride in their car in silence? My people. If you're not raising your hand, go talk to those people because they got some peace in their life. So I'm just saying. Everybody's going to now get phone numbers at Connection Cafe, right? That's everybody's homework? All right, good job. So, but I also get to live at peace with the people in my life. Like I get to show up to work and not be afraid of if they smell alcohol on my breath, not be afraid of, well, maybe I did or do they think I did something wrong? I literally, guys, one of my fears was I was afraid that a store would think I'm shoplifting. So I was afraid to even have my purse near the cart in case they thought that something in the cart might have fallen into my purse and now I'm walking out with it on accident. Like, these things were crazy. Like, now I accidentally stole a banana the other day because they do it by weight and not by quantity. Target's not mad at me. They let me walk out with the banana. My kid was screaming, okay? Stole the banana in the name of Jesus. Just kidding. Don't steal. Don't do that. But that fear doesn't rule me anymore. So those freedoms, those relationships, if I hadn't been set free from those fears of my divorce and all my other past relationships and the not being lovable and not being important, I would have never said yes to marrying the best guy that ever walked the earth besides Jesus. If you don't know, it's Curtis. But yes, so what is our action step? What can we do? So if you are new to recovery, this is your first time in, or you are just getting started, you can start real easy. Think of one thing that you do that you know is bothering or hurting or causing harm to other people that you keep intentionally doing. And talk to somebody here about it. Talk to them. Work on a plan. Hey, have you ever struggled with this? How'd you kind of get past it? Real easy step. That's what I did when I came in. My sponsor literally said, hey, maybe you shouldn't show up drunk to step study. Real story, guys. She's like, it might be triggering some of the alcoholics in the room smelling the alcohol in your breath. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't be bothering them. But I asked, how do I stop? And so I stopped hanging out with my drinking buddy before step study. There's simple steps, little things. We all can do them, okay? Next, if you are at this step, if you're at this making the list and making your amends, keep doing it. Keep reaching out to your sponsor and your accountability. Remember, don't do it alone. That's the thing. I had to role play how I did my amends. I had to role play because I needed it to not be for them and trying to make all of them happy, but I needed to do it for me so that I could be set free. But I also had to be set free from the expectation of what they were going to do. Because like the Serenity Prayer says, I can't control all of that. The letting go of the things I can't control and having the wisdom to know the difference. And so I can't control how somebody's going to react or respond to my amends. And that was a fear I had to let go of. And so role playing with my sponsor to see, hey, if I say it like this, is this me manipulating them? Is this me trying to get what I want out of it? So don't do it alone. Work on it with your sponsor. And if you've done some amends, or you think you've done all of your amends, maybe talk to your sponsor and see if there might be any more in there for you to do. Because some of those amends might even be to yourself. And so the best way for me to get set free from the things that are bothering me was to also make amends to myself for the harm I had done. Thank you for letting me share.